The dust storm that rolled through Alpine, Texas, that August afternoon in 1882, buried Violet's parents under a collapsed barn wall, and now she stood at 21 years old with 4 younger siblings looking to her for answers she did not have. The funeral had been 3 days ago, and already the creditors were circling like vultures. Violet Dalton sat at the scratched wooden table in their small ranch house, spreading out the few bills and notices that had accumulated since her parents' deaths. Her father had been a decent rancher, but medical expenses from her mother's long illness 2 years prior had eaten through most of their savings. Now the bank wanted payment on loans Violet had not even known existed. Violet. Her youngest sister Lily, only 6 years old, tugged at her sleeve. "I am hungry." Violet looked down at the child's wide brown eyes and felt her heart clench. Behind Lily stood their brothers, Thomas at 14 and Samuel at 10, and their middle sister Rose, who had just turned 12. 4 faces watching her, waiting for her to somehow make everything right. "I know, sweetheart." Violet rose from the chair and moved to the small pantry. The supplies were running dangerously low. She pulled out what flour remained and began mixing biscuits, stretching the portions as far as they would go. "Thomas, go check if the chickens laid any eggs today." The boy nodded and headed outside. He had barely spoken since the funeral, carrying his grief like a heavy stone around his neck. Samuel followed him out, always shadowing his older brother. Rose moved to stand beside Violet at the counter. "We do not have much left, do we?" Violet glanced at her sister. Rose had always been perceptive beyond her years. There was no use lying to her. "No, we do not." "What are we going to do?" "I am going to figure something out." Violet shaped the biscuit dough with hands that wanted to tremble but would not let them. "I always do." But this time, she was not sure that was true. The next morning, Violet rode into town with Thomas. She needed to speak with the banker, though she dreaded the conversation. Alpine was a small town nestled in the high desert of West Texas, surrounded by mountains that gave the place its name. The morning air was already warm, promising another scorching day. The bank was a sturdy adobe building on Main Street. Violet tied her horse to the hitching post and smoothed down her worn black mourning dress. Thomas waited outside while she went in, not wanting him to hear whatever harsh words were about to come. Mr. Henderson, the banker, was a thin man with spectacles that perpetually slid down his narrow nose. He looked up as Violet entered, and his expression shifted to something between sympathy and discomfort. "Miss Dalton, I was expecting you might come by, Mr. Henderson." Violet stood straight, keeping her shoulders back despite wanting to crumble. "I came to discuss my father's loans." "Yes." "Well." He shuffled papers on his desk. "Your father owed the bank a considerable sum. With his passing, the debt falls to his estate, which means it falls to you as the eldest. How much time do I have?" "The bank needs payment within 60 days, or we will have to foreclose on the property." 60 days. Violet's mind raced. "What if I can make partial payments, keep the ranch running, sell cattle?" Mr. Henderson removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief. "Miss Dalton, I will be frank with you. Your father had 20 head of cattle, and most of them are scrub stock. Even if you sold them all, it would not cover half the debt. And forgive me for saying so, but a young woman alone cannot run a cattle ranch, especially not with 4 children to care for. I am not afraid of hard work. It is not about work ethic. It is about reality." His voice was not unkind, but it was firm. "My advice would be to sell what you can, pay what you can, and consider other arrangements for you and your siblings. Perhaps family back east." "We have no other family." Violet's voice came out harder than she intended. "This ranch is our home." "I am sorry, Miss Dalton, truly. But the bank cannot make exceptions, even in tragic circumstances. 60 days. Violet left the bank feeling as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Thomas looked at her face as she emerged and asked no questions, which somehow made it worse. They rode home in silence. The ranch was modest, just over 100 acres of scrubland with a creek running through the eastern section. The house was small but sturdy, built by Violet's grandfather 40 years ago. The barn, recently rebuilt after the storm, stood as a painful reminder of how quickly everything could fall apart. Over the next 2 weeks, Violet worked herself to exhaustion. She woke before dawn to tend the chickens and milk their 2 cows. She spent her days trying to assess which cattle might fetch decent prices, riding the property line to check fences, hauling water, and attempting to keep up with the endless demands of the ranch. In the evenings, she cooked meager meals, helped Samuel with his raiding, and mended clothes by lamplight until her eyes burned. Thomas helped as much as he could, but he was still a boy, gangly and not yet grown into his full strength. Rose took over caring for Lily and Samuel during the day, but Violet could see the strain on her young sister's face, the childhood being stripped away too soon. One afternoon, while Violet was struggling to repair a section of fence on the eastern pasture, she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow, and saw a rider coming up the path. He was a tall man on a bay horse, wearing the typical attire of a working cowboy: sturdy denim pants, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the brutal sun. As he drew closer, Violet could make out more details. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His jaw was shadowed with a few days' worth of stubble, and his eyes, when he lifted his head, were a striking blue-gray. "Afternoon," he called out, reining in his horse a respectful distance away. "I am looking for the Dalton place. You found it." Violet kept her voice neutral, wary of strangers. "I am Violet Dalton. Ryder Morrison, madam." He touched the brim of his hat. "I worked for your father last spring during the branding. I was passing through town and heard about what happened. I wanted to pay my respects." Violet studied him, searching her memory. Her father had hired several hands for a few weeks last year when he was trying to expand the herd. The face was vaguely familiar. "That is kind of you, Mr. Morrison. My parents are buried on the hill behind the house if you would like to visit." Ryder nodded slowly. Then his gaze traveled to the fence she had been working on, the hammer lying in the dust, the tangle of wire. "Having some trouble?" Violet bristled slightly. "Nothing I cannot handle." "I did not mean to suggest otherwise." His tone was mild, no judgment in it. "Just that fence work goes faster with 2 people. She should send him on his way. She should maintain her pride and independence." But Violet was exhausted and scared and so very tired of pretending she had everything under control. "I suppose that is true." Ryder dismounted and tied his horse to a nearby post. He picked up the hammer and examined the fence line with a practiced eye. "If you hold this post steady, I can get the wire secured properly." They worked in silence for a while. Ryder was efficient and skilled, his hands confident with the tools. Violet found herself studying him surreptitiously. He had the lean, muscled build of someone who made his living through physical labor, and he moved with an easy grace. When he spoke again, his voice was conversational. "Your father was a good man, fair and honest. That is rare enough in this world." "Yes, he was." Violet's throat tightened. "I heard about the barn collapse. That was a cruel twist of fate. The storm came out of nowhere. They were trying to get the horses to safety when the wall gave way." Violet did not add that she had been in town that day with the younger children. that she would carry the guilt of not being there for the rest of her life. Ryder paused in his work, his eyes meeting hers with genuine sympathy. "I am sorry. That is a heavy burden to carry, especially with young ones depending on you. We are managing. How many siblings do you have?" "4. Thomas is 14, Rose is 12, Samuel is 10, and Lily is 6. Ryder let out a low whistle. "That is a lot of responsibility for anyone, let alone someone trying to run a ranch." Violet's defenses rose again. "I am capable. I am sure you are." He returned to the fence, driving in another post. "But capable does not mean it is not hard." They finished the fence section as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Ryder gathered his tools and handed Violet the hammer. She expected him to mount up and ride away, but instead he glanced toward the house where smoke was rising from the chimney. "Would it be forward of me to ask if there is water for my horse? We have been riding since morning." "Of course." Violet led him to the trough near the barn. As his horse drank, the back door of the house opened and Rose appeared, Lily clinging to her skirts. "Violet," Rose called out. "Should I set the table?" "Yes, go ahead." Violet turned to Ryder. "It is not much, but you are welcome to stay for supper. It is the least I can offer after your help." Ryder hesitated, as if weighing whether to accept. "I would not want to impose." "You helped fix a fence I have been fighting with for 2 days. You are not imposing. Then I would be grateful." Inside, the house was small but clean. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a fireplace at one end and the scarred wooden table in the center. 2 small bedrooms branched off to the sides, and a ladder led to a loft where the boys slept. Thomas was already at the table, and his eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of a stranger. Samuel peered around his older brother with curiosity. Lily stared openly from behind Rose. "This is Mr. Morrison," Violet announced. "He worked for Papa last year and helped me with the east fence today. He is joining us for supper. Call me Ryder, please." He removed his hat and held it in his hands, suddenly looking younger and less imposing. "You must be Thomas. Your father spoke of you often, said you had a good head for numbers." Thomas's suspicion softened slightly. "He did. Said you could count cattle faster than any hand he had ever seen." A small smile flickered across Thomas's face before he caught himself and let it fade. Rose served the meal, which was a watery stew stretched with extra vegetables and biscuits that were more air than substance. Violet felt embarrassed by the meager offering, but Ryder ate without comment or complaint, complimenting Rose on her cooking in a way that made the girl blush with pleasure. "So where are you headed, Mr. Morrison?" Thomas asked, apparently deciding the stranger was worth conversation. "Ryder," he corrected again. "And I am not entirely sure. I have been working ranches between here and New Mexico for the past few years, going where the work is." "That must be lonely," Rose observed quietly. Ryder looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "It can be. But I learned a long time ago that you cannot always control your circumstances. Sometimes you just keep moving forward and hope for the best." After supper, Violet walked Ryder out to his horse. The evening air was cooling and the first stars were emerging in the darkening sky. Ryder adjusted his saddle and then turned to face her. "Miss Dalton, I hope this is not too forward, but I have to ask, how bad are things?" Violet considered lying, maintaining the facade, but something about Ryder's direct gaze and the genuine concern in his voice made her honest. "The bank is calling in my father's loans. I have less than 50 days to come up with more money than I can possibly raise, or we lose the ranch." Ryder was quiet for a long moment, and if you lose the ranch, I do not know. The admission felt like failure. "There is an orphanage in San Antonio, but they only take children under 12, which means Thomas would have to find work somewhere, and I cannot bear the thought of splitting up the family. There has to be another way. If there is, I have not found it." Violet wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the lingering heat of the day. "I have been trying to keep everyone's spirits up, trying to make them believe everything will be all right, but the truth is I am terrified." "How much do you owe?" $3,000. Ryder let out a breath. "That is a substantial sum. My mother was sick for a long time before she passed. The medical bills, the medicine from back east, it all added up. My father did what he had to do to save her and then to keep the ranch going after. I do not fault him for the debt, but now I am drowning in it." "What if you had help?" Violet looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Ryder seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "I have some money saved. Not $3,000, but enough to buy you some time with the bank. And I am a good worker. I know cattle, I know horses. I can fix just about anything that breaks. If you had an extra hand, someone who knew what they were doing, you might be able to increase the ranch's productivity enough to start chipping away at the debt." "I cannot pay you. I can barely feed the children I already have. I am not asking for pay, just room and board. I can sleep in the barn." Violet stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Why would you do that? You do not even know us. I know your father was a decent man who treated his workers with respect. I know you are trying to hold your family together against impossible odds, and I know what it is like to be alone in the world with no one to turn to." Ryder's voice was steady, but there was an old pain beneath the words. "Maybe I can help. Maybe it will not be enough, but at least you will have tried everything possible. You do not owe us anything." "No, I do not, but that does not mean I cannot choose to help anyway." Violet felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She had been strong for so long, holding everything together through sheer will, and here was this near stranger offering her something she had not even known she could ask for. "Help. I do not understand why you would do this." Ryder looked up at the emerging stars, his profile sharp against the dimming sky. "When I was 16, my family's farm in Missouri burned down. My parents and little sister died in the fire. I was out in the fields and could not get to them in time. After that, I had nothing and no one. I wandered for a year, half starving, doing odd jobs, sleeping rough. Then a rancher in Kansas took a chance on me. He did not have to, but he gave me work and food and a place to sleep. He taught me the cattle business. When I asked him why he helped me, he said that we are all just one disaster away from losing everything, and the only thing that makes us human is whether we help each other when the disasters come." He turned back to Violet. "I have been drifting for a long time, looking for something I could not name. Maybe this is it. Maybe I can be for your family what that rancher was for me." Violet felt something crack open in her chest, a desperate hope she was afraid to embrace. What if it is not enough? What if we still lose everything? Then at least you will know you did not fight alone. Ryder held out his hand. "What do you say, Miss Dalton? Will you let me help?" Violet looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and honest, offering something she had thought impossible. She thought of Thomas's withdrawn silence, Rose's strained face, Samuel's growing thinness, and Lily's too frequent hunger. She thought of the impossible weight she had been carrying alone. She reached out and clasped his hand. "Yes." The next morning, Ryder was up before dawn, and Violet found him in the barn already mucking out stalls. He had made a neat bedroll in one of the empty stalls, his few belongings stowed carefully in a corner. "You did not have to start without me," Violet said, picking up a pitchfork. "Habit. I have been waking before sunrise for so long I do not think I could sleep late if I tried." He tossed soiled hay into the wheelbarrow. "I was thinking we should assess the herd today, see exactly what you are working with." Then we can make decisions about which animals to sell and which to keep for breeding. Over the following days, a routine developed. Ryder worked alongside Thomas and Violet during the day, teaching Thomas skills that Violet did not have, showing him how to read cattle, how to predict weather patterns, how to manage the land properly. In the evenings, he helped Samuel practice roping techniques in the yard while Violet and Rose prepared supper. Lily, initially shy around the tall stranger, began following Ryder around like a small shadow. He was patient with her questions, and one afternoon Violet found him teaching the 6-year-old how to whittle, his large hands guiding her small ones as they shaped a piece of wood into a rough horse figure. "You are good with them," Violet said that evening after the children were in bed. She and Ryder sat on the porch, the day's heat finally dissipating into cool night air. "They are good kids. You have done well with them, especially considering the circumstances. I feel like I am failing them every day. I am not their mother. I do not always know what to say or do." "You are there. You are trying. That is more than a lot of people get." Ryder leaned back against the porch post. "My sister was only 8 when she died. Sometimes I wonder what kind of person she would have grown up to be. Lily reminds me of her sometimes." Curious about everything, always asking why. It was the first time he had mentioned his sister unprompted. Violet felt the trust in that sharing. "What was her name?" "Maggie, short for Margaret." A sad smile crossed his face. "She used to make up songs about everything. Drove my father crazy, but my mother loved it. I am sorry you lost them. It was a long time ago, but you do not ever really stop missing them, do you?" "No," Violet agreed softly. "You do not." They sat in companionable silence, the night settling around them with cricket songs and the distant howl of a coyote. Violet found herself acutely aware of Ryder's presence, the steady calm he brought to their chaotic household. In just a week, he had become integral to their daily life, and she was not sure what that meant or what she felt about it. A month passed. The ranch began to show signs of improvement under Ryder's management. He identified several head of cattle that were suffering from screwworm and treated them before the infection could spread. He repaired the irrigation system that fed from the creek, increasing water access to the pastures. He taught Thomas how to work with horses, and the boy flourished under the attention and instruction. Violet found herself watching Ryder more than she should. She noticed the way his hands moved with surety and confidence. She noticed how he always made sure the children ate before taking his own portion. She noticed that he sang sometimes while he worked, low and tuneless, as if he did not realize he was doing it. One afternoon, while Violet was hanging laundry, Rose came to stand beside her. "You like him?" Rose asked without preamble. "Who?" Violet knew exactly who. "Ryder. Do you like him? He has been very helpful to us." "That is not what I asked." Rose fixed her with a knowing look far too mature for 12 years old. Violet fumbled with a shirt, pinning it crookedly to the line. "It does not matter if I like him or not. He is here to help us save the ranch, not to court me." "But do you?" Violet stopped, holding a damp sheet against her chest. "I do not know. Maybe, but we cannot afford for me to think that way. He will move on eventually. Men like him always do." "What if he does not?" "Rose, do not spin fairy tales. Life is not that simple." But Rose just smiled and went back to the house, leaving Violet to wonder if perhaps her sister saw something she was trying not to acknowledge. That evening, Thomas approached Violet with a ledger book, his face serious. "I have been keeping track like you asked. The numbers are better than last month, but we are still not going to make enough to pay off the bank." Violet took the book and studied the neat columns of Thomas's handwriting. He was right. Even with Ryder's improvements, even with the money from selling their best cattle, they would fall short. What if we sold more? Thomas suggested. We could sell almost all of them, keep just a few for breeding next year. That would give us money now but leave us with no income going forward. Violet rubbed her temples where a headache was forming. We would be right back in the same situation next year. Then what do we do? I do not know yet. Ryder, who had been listening from across the room where he was helping Samuel with arithmetic, spoke up. There might be another option. The railroad is looking for beef contracts. If we could prove we have steady production capacity, we could negotiate a contract that would give you regular income. It would not solve the immediate debt, but it would give the bank confidence that you could pay them back over time. How do you know about railroad contracts? Violet asked. I worked for a ranch in New Mexico that had one, changed everything for them, but you need to show you can deliver consistent quality and quantity, which we cannot do right now, not yet, but we could. Ryder leaned forward, his eyes intent. Hear me out. What if we pooled resources with some of the smaller ranchers around here? Create a cooperative that could meet the railroad's volume requirements. You would maintain ownership of your land and cattle, but you would market together, negotiate together. There is strength in numbers. Thomas looked intrigued. Could that work? It has worked other places. The key is getting ranchers to trust each other enough to cooperate instead of compete. Violet felt a flicker of hope. Do you think we could convince people? I think if we present it right, they will see the benefit. Most of the small operations around here are probably struggling just like you are. The big ranches can negotiate favorable terms because of their size. But if the small ranches band together, they could level the playing field. When could we start? How about tomorrow? We can ride to the neighboring spreads and talk to folks. Over the next week, Violet and Ryder visited every small rancher within 20 miles. Some were skeptical, but others were intrigued by the idea. A grizzled old rancher named Jake Sullivan, who had a modest spread south of the Daltons, immediately saw the potential. My grandson has been trying to convince me to sell out to the big outfits, Jake said, leaning against his corral fence. But this place has been in my family for 30 years. I do not want to give it up, but I also cannot compete on my own. If this cooperative idea works, maybe I would not have to. By the end of 2 weeks, they had commitments from 8 small ranchers, representing nearly 500 head of cattle collectively. It was enough to approach the railroad. The meeting with the railroad representative was scheduled for the first week of September in Alpine's small hotel. Violet wore her best dress, which was still her morning black but freshly pressed and mended. Ryder wore a clean shirt and had trimmed his beard. Jake Sullivan came along for support, along with 2 other ranchers from the proposed cooperative. The railroad man, a Mr. Pemberton from Kansas City, was a portly gentleman with impressive mutton chops and a shrewd eye. He listened to their proposal with poker-faced attention, occasionally making notes in a small book. You understand that the railroad requires consistent delivery, he said, when Ryder finished the presentation. We cannot have shipments failing to materialize because 1 or 2 ranchers decide to back out or sell elsewhere. That is why we are forming a legal cooperative, Ryder explained. Each member will sign a contract committing to specific delivery quantities. If someone fails to meet their quota, the others will cover the shortfall. We succeed together or fail together. And you believe you can maintain quality standards. We do. Every animal will be inspected before shipment. We are not interested in damaging our reputation with inferior stock. Mr. Pemberton tapped his pencil against his notebook. This is unusual, but I admit the concept has merit. The railroad is interested in expanding our beef transport through West Texas. Having a reliable supplier network would benefit both parties. He looked at Violet. Young lady, This is your ranch we are discussing as the primary coordinating location. Yes, sir. And you believe you can manage this operation. No offense intended, but you are quite young, and cattle operations of this scale require experience. Before Violet could respond, Jake Sullivan spoke up. Mr. Pemberton, I have been ranching in this area for 3 decades. I have seen plenty of men with experience run their operations into the ground through poor judgment or laziness. This young woman has been keeping her family together and her ranch running under circumstances that would have broken most people, and she is smart enough to surround herself with good people. He nodded toward Ryder. Morrison here knows cattle as well as anyone I have met. Between the 2 of them and the rest of us backing them up, you will get your beef delivered on time and in good condition. Mr. Pemberton studied them all for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I will draw up a provisional contract. You have 6 months to prove you can meet the delivery schedule. If you succeed, we will negotiate a long-term arrangement. If you fail, the contract terminates and you will owe penalties for non-delivery. Is that acceptable? Violet's heart was pounding. 6 months to prove themselves. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Yes, sir, that is acceptable. They shook hands, and Violet felt as though she was shaking hands with her future, uncertain but finally possible. On the ride back to the ranch, Ryder was uncharacteristically quiet. Violet glanced at him several times before finally asking, "What are you thinking?" "That we just committed to something very difficult. Are you regretting it?" "No." He looked at her, and his expression was serious. "But I want you to understand what this means. For the next 6 months, we are going to be working harder than you have ever worked. There will be no room for error. And if we fail, you will not just lose the ranch, you will owe the railroad money you definitely do not have. I know." Violet kept her eyes on the road ahead. "But this is the first real chance we have had. I have to take it. I know you do, and I am with you. I just needed you to know what you were walking into." "I already knew, but thank you for caring enough to worry." Something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of a deepening connection that neither quite knew how to name. When they reached the ranch, the children rushed out to hear the news. Violet explained the railroad contract in terms they could understand, watching their faces light up with hope. "Does this mean we can stay?" Samuel asked, his voice small and afraid to believe. "If we work very hard and everything goes right, yes, we can stay." Lily threw herself at Violet's legs, hugging tight. Rose had tears streaming down her face. Even Thomas, who had been trying so hard to be stoic and adult, let himself smile. That night, after the children were asleep, Violet sat on the porch again. The relief of having a plan was overwhelming, but so was the fear of what lay ahead. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear Ryder approach until he sat down beside her. "You did well today," he said. "Standing up to that railroad man, negotiating the terms. Your father would be proud. I could not have done it without you. The whole cooperative idea, that was yours. Ideas are easy. It is the execution that matters, and that is going to be on you." "On us," Violet corrected. "You are part of this now." Ryder was quiet for a moment. "Violet, I need to tell you something." Her stomach tightened at his tone. "What is it?" "When I came here, I thought I would help you out for a few weeks, maybe a month, and then move on like I always do. But that is not what happened." "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, and in the moonlight his eyes were intense. "I mean, I care about what happens here. I care about Thomas learning to be confident. I care about Rose's terrible singing when she does the dishes. I care about Samuel's scraped knees and Lily's endless questions. And I care about you, Violet, more than I should probably admit." Violet's breath caught. "Ryder, I am not saying this to pressure you or to expect anything in return. I know you have enough on your plate without adding complicated feelings to the mix. But I also believe in being honest, and the honest truth is that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a good deed and became something more. This became my family. You became. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. You became important. Violet felt tears welling up, but this time they were different. Not tears of grief or fear, but something warmer and more frightening in its own way. You became important to me too. I have been trying not to think about it because I was afraid. Afraid you would leave, afraid I was being foolish, afraid I did not have room in my life for anything beyond survival. And now I think maybe survival is not enough. Maybe I want more than that. Maybe I want. She trailed off, not quite brave enough to finish the sentence. Ryder reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he took her hand in his palm warm and solid against hers. Maybe you want what I want, a chance to see if this could be something real. Yes, Violet whispered, but I am scared. So am I. But I think being scared and trying anyway is better than being safe and wondering what if. They sat there holding hands under the vast Texas sky, neither speaking, just existing together in the moment. It felt monumental and simple at the same time, like crossing a threshold into unknown territory that somehow felt like coming home. The next months were a blur of intense work. The cooperative began meeting weekly to coordinate efforts. Ryder taught the other ranchers techniques he had learned over his years of wandering, and they in turn shared knowledge specific to the harsh West Texas environment. Slowly, they began to function as a cohesive unit rather than isolated operations competing for scarce resources. Violet found herself riding out with Ryder most days, checking cattle, maintaining fences, managing the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. He was teaching her things her father never had, treating her as a full partner rather than someone to be protected from the harder aspects of ranch life. She learned to read the land the way he did, to see what the cattle needed before they showed obvious signs of distress, to predict weather changes from subtle shifts in wind and sky. One afternoon in late October, they were riding the northern boundary when Ryder's horse suddenly reared. A diamondback rattlesnake, disturbed from its basking spot, had struck out in warning. Ryder controlled his horse with practiced ease, but the snake was coiled and agitated between them and the path home. Violet reached for the rifle in her saddle scabbard, but Ryder held up a hand. "Wait. He is just scared. If we give him space, he will move on." They sat quietly on their horses, waiting. Sure enough, after a few minutes, the snake uncoiled and slithered away into the rocks. Ryder relaxed, patting his horse's neck to calm it. "You could have shot it," Violet said. "I could have. But he was not really threatening us, just defending himself. Seems wrong to kill something for being afraid." It was such a small moment, but it showed Violet something essential about who Ryder was. He had a core of gentleness beneath his capable exterior, a respect for life that extended even to creatures most people would kill without thought. "What?" Ryder asked, noticing her staring. "Nothing. I was just thinking about how much has changed since August. For the better, I hope." "Yes. Definitely for the better." As November arrived, the first cattle shipment was due. The cooperative had spent weeks selecting the best animals, inspecting them for health and quality. The morning they were to be driven to the railroad depot was cold and crisp, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. Thomas and Samuel helped drive the cattle, sitting tall in their saddles and taking the responsibility seriously. Rose and Lily stayed behind, and Violet felt Rose's tight hug before she left. "Be careful," Rose whispered. "Always." The drive to the depot took most of the day. The cattle were loaded into rail cars as Mr. Pemberton oversaw the process, his clipboard in hand. When the last animal was aboard, he approached Violet and Ryder. "Well done. The quality exceeds our expectations." He made a note on his clipboard. "Your payment will be processed within the week." Violet felt relief so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Pemberton." "Thank you, Miss Dalton. The railroad appreciates reliable partners. I look forward to a long and mutually beneficial relationship." On the ride home, with the promise of payment coming and the first major hurdle cleared, Violet allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in months: hope. Real, solid hope that they might actually make this work. That evening, the entire cooperative gathered at the Dalton Ranch to celebrate. Violet had been cooking all day with Rose's help, preparing a feast from their now better-stocked pantry. Jake Sullivan brought a fiddle, and someone else contributed a jug of whiskey that the adults passed around while the children drank apple cider. As the evening wore on and people danced in the yard under the stars, Ryder found Violet taking a brief rest on the porch steps. "You did it," he said, settling beside her. "Your first successful shipment, we did it. This was never just me." "No, but you were the one who held it all together. You were the one who refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier." Ryder looked at her with such admiration that Violet felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You are remarkable, Violet Dalton. I am just doing what needs to be done. That is what makes you remarkable." Inside the house, the fiddle struck up a waltz. Ryder stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me." "Here, why not? The music carries." Violet let him pull her to her feet. He placed one hand at her waist, taking her other hand in his, and they began to move in the small space of the porch. It was not graceful, and they stumbled occasionally on the uneven boards, but it felt perfect anyway. "I never learned to dance properly," Ryder admitted. "My mother tried to teach me once, but I was too busy being a stubborn boy who thought dancing was foolish." "You are doing fine." Violet found herself very aware of everywhere their bodies touched: the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress, the solid presence of his shoulder under her palm. "Violet," Ryder said softly, and something in his voice made her look up. His face was very close to hers, his eyes searching her expression. "May I kiss you?" Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he must hear it. "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle and questioning, a first kiss full of promise rather than demand. Violet felt something unfurl inside her chest, something warm and bright and terrifying in the best possible way. When they broke apart, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "Why did you wait?" "Because I wanted to be sure. Sure that I was not taking advantage of the situation, sure that you felt something too, sure that this was real and not just proximity and circumstance. And now you are sure." "As sure as I have ever been about anything. I love you, Violet. I know it is fast and maybe foolish, but I love you." Violet felt tears prickling her eyes again, but they were good tears. "I love you too. I did not want to admit it because I was afraid of losing something else, but I do." "I love you, Ryder Morrison." They kissed again, longer this time, and behind them, Violet dimly heard Jake Sullivan's fiddle hit a wrong note as he presumably noticed what was happening on the porch. There would be talk and questions and probably some teasing, but Violet found she did not care. For the first time since her parents died, she felt like something in her life was not about duty or survival, but about choice and joy. The rest of November passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Ryder still slept in the barn, maintaining propriety, but he and Violet were together every moment they could manage. They talked about everything during their long days riding the property. His childhood in Missouri, her dreams of someday expanding the ranch, their favorite books, and their thoughts on everything from politics to the best way to make cornbread. December brought the first real cold snap. Ryder taught Thomas and Samuel how to break ice on the water troughs each morning. Rose began making plans for Christmas, determined that this year would be better than the painful holiday they had all anticipated months ago. One evening in mid-December, after the children were in bed, Ryder asked Violet to walk with him despite the cold. They bundled in coats and scarves and walked up the hill behind the house where her parents were buried. Two simple wooden crosses marked the graves, and Ryder stood quietly as Violet brushed away the dust that had accumulated on them. "I come up here sometimes," Violet said softly, "to talk to them, to tell them what is happening. I know they cannot hear me, but it helps somehow." "I think they can hear you," Ryder said. "Maybe not the way they could when they were alive, but in some way. Love does not just disappear when someone dies. I hope so. I hope they know that I am doing my best with the children, that we are going to be all right. They know. And they know about us." Violet smiled. "That feels presumptuous. We have only been courting for a month, closer to 2 if we count from when we admitted our feelings. But that is not why I brought you up here." Ryder reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. "I know this is fast. I know conventional wisdom says we should wait longer, be more certain. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are what I have been looking for since I lost my family. You and Thomas and Rose and Samuel and Lily. You are my home, Violet. The place I want to stay for the rest of my life." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small stone set in it. "This was my grandmother's ring. It is the only thing I have left from my old life. I have been carrying it around for years, never knowing why I kept it. Now I know. I was keeping it for you." Violet stared at the ring, then at Ryder's face, barely visible in the darkness. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes, I am asking you to marry me, Violet Dalton. I am asking if I can spend the rest of my life helping you raise your siblings, building this ranch, growing old together. I am asking if you will let me be part of your family officially, legally, permanently." Violet thought about her parents, buried beneath her feet. She thought about how her father had loved her mother, how he had worked himself to exhaustion trying to save her during her illness. She thought about what real love meant, sacrifice and partnership and choosing each other every day. "Yes," she said, her voice catching on the word. "Yes, I will marry you." Ryder let out a breath she had not realized he was holding. He took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting there all along. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Violet felt that sense of coming home intensify until it seemed to encompass everything. They told the children the next morning at breakfast. Lily squealed with delight and immediately asked if this meant Ryder would be her brother now. Samuel was confused about the difference between brother and father, until Rose explained. Thomas looked uncertain at first, and Violet knew he was wrestling with feelings about their dead parents and whether accepting Ryder meant betraying their memory. "Thomas," Ryder said, addressing the boy directly, "I am not trying to replace your father. I could never do that, and I would not want to. But I love your sister, and I love all of you, and I want to be part of this family if you will have me." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to promise you will not leave, no matter what happens. You have to promise you will stay." "I promise. I am here for the rest of my life, however long that is. You are stuck with me." A small smile crossed Thomas's face. "Good." They decided to marry in late January, giving them time to get through the holidays and plan a simple ceremony. Violet made herself a new dress, cream-colored rather than white, practical but pretty. Rose insisted on making a cake, practicing her recipe multiple times until she was satisfied with the results. Christmas was quiet but happy. The children received small presents, practical things like new boots and warmer coats, but also small luxuries like candy and books. Ryder gave Violet a leather-bound journal, saying that their story deserved to be written down. Violet gave him a new hat, replacing his worn one, with his initials stitched inside the brim. The wedding was held on a bright cold morning in late January of 1883. Jake Sullivan stood up with Ryder, and Rose stood with Violet. The ceremony took place in the small church in Alpine with the cooperative members and a few townspeople in attendance. The preacher was an elderly man who kept the service simple and heartfelt. When Ryder slipped the ring on Violet's finger and said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. When Violet said hers, she meant every word with her entire being. They were pledging to build a life together, to face whatever came as a unit rather than as individuals struggling alone. The kiss that sealed their marriage was chaste and brief, appropriate for a church setting, but Violet felt the promise in it of more to come. The reception was held back at the ranch. Someone had strung up decorations, and tables were loaded with food contributed by the community. The children were giddy with excitement, running around with the other young people in attendance. Violet felt a sense of deep peace watching them, knowing that they were secure now in ways they had not been just months ago. As the sun began to set, Ryder and Violet slipped away from the party to the barn, which had been cleaned and arranged to serve as their bedroom now. Ryder had built a proper bed frame, and Rose had sewn curtains to section off the space, making it private and comfortable. "Alone at last," Ryder said, pulling Violet into his arms. "Are you happy?" Violet asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be. You?" "Yes, though part of me keeps waiting for something to go wrong for this to be taken away." "Nothing is going to take this away. We are married now, Violet Morrison. You are stuck with me." Violet smiled, hearing her new name out loud for the first time. "Violet Morrison, I like the sound of that. So do I." They kissed, and this time it deepened into something more urgent, the restraint of months falling away. Violet felt nervous and excited in equal measure, but Ryder was patient and gentle, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt right and natural and perfect. Afterward, lying in Ryder's arms, Violet felt a contentment she had not known since before her parents died. The future still held uncertainties and challenges, but she would face them with her husband beside her and her family secure. That was enough. The months that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. The cooperative continued to thrive, delivering shipments to the railroad on schedule and building a reputation for quality. By spring, Mr. Pemberton was talking about expanding their contract, and other railroads were expressing interest in similar arrangements with small rancher cooperatives. The bank, seeing consistent payments and improved prospects, agreed to restructure the remaining debt into manageable installments. For the first time since her parents' deaths, Violet could look at the ranch's finances without feeling sick with worry. Thomas, now 15, was growing into a confident young man under Ryder's mentorship. He was talking about eventually starting his own small herd on a section of the property. Rose had developed a talent for keeping the cooperative's books, her neat handwriting and careful calculations earning praise from the other ranchers. Samuel was becoming an excellent horseman, and Lily had declared that she wanted to be a rancher when she grew up, just like Violet. In May, Violet realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. She told Ryder one evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His eyes went wide. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I think I am with child." Ryder let out a whoop of joy and spun her around, making Violet laugh and shush him at the same time. "You will wake everyone. I do not care. We are going to have a baby." He set her down gently, suddenly solicitous. "Should you be spinning around? Is that safe? I am fine. Women have been having babies forever." "Yes, but this is our baby. That makes it different." Violet felt tears of happiness welling up. "Are you happy about this?" "Happy? Violet, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I do not have words for it." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby. Our baby." They told the children the next morning. Lily wanted to know if they could name the baby after their mother if it was a girl. Samuel asked practical questions about where the baby would sleep. Rose teared up and hugged Violet tightly. Thomas looked uncomfortable with the whole topic, but managed a smile and a gruff congratulations. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the hot summer months. Violet found she could still do most of her usual work, though Ryder hovered more than she appreciated, trying to get her to rest and take it easy. Rose stepped up to help with the heavier chores, and even Lily tried to be useful in her 6-year-old way. In early November, Violet went into labor. The local midwife, Mrs. Patterson, arrived quickly and took charge. Ryder paced outside the bedroom, banned from entering by Mrs. Patterson's firm orders. Rose kept the younger children occupied and trying not to worry. The labor was long and difficult. Violet lost track of time, existing only in waves of pain and exhaustion. But finally, as the sun was setting, she heard the thin cry of an infant. "It is a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the tiny, squalling bundle in Violet's arms. "A healthy baby boy." Ryder was allowed in then, and Violet watched his face as he saw his son for the first time. The look of wonder and love was so profound that Violet felt her heart might burst. "He is perfect," Ryder whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one gentle finger. "You are perfect." "Thank you, Violet. Thank you for this." They named him William Thomas Morrison after both their fathers. Little William was a good baby, fussy but not impossibly so. The siblings doted on him. Even Thomas, who had pretended indifference right up until he held his nephew for the first time, and something in his teenage facade cracked to reveal genuine affection. Life settled into a new rhythm that incorporated the baby. Violet found herself exhausted in ways she had not anticipated, but Ryder was an involved father, taking William whenever he could to give Violet rest. Rose helped with the nighttime feedings, and even Lily was useful in fetching diapers and cooing at her nephew. The ranch continued to prosper. By William's first birthday, the cooperative had expanded to 12-member ranches and had signed a 5-year contract with the railroad. The debt to the bank was more than half paid off, and Violet had been able to make modest improvements to the house, adding a proper nursery and expanding the kitchen. On a warm evening in June of 1884, Violet sat on the porch holding William while he nursed. Ryder sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. In the yard, Thomas was teaching Samuel some new roping techniques while Rose and Lily watched and offered commentary. "Did you ever imagine this when you were standing at your parents' grave, terrified about the future?" Ryder asked softly. "No. I imagined losing everything. I imagined the family being split up. I imagined failing." Violet looked down at William's peaceful face. "I never imagined this much happiness, this much security. I never imagined it either. I thought I would wander forever, always looking for something I could not name. Turns out I was looking for home, for family, for you. Do you ever regret it? Stopping here instead of moving on, not for a single moment. This is where I was always meant to be. I just did not know it until I found you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Violet thought about how much had changed in less than 2 years. She had gone from a terrified 21-year-old facing impossible odds to a wife, mother, and successful rancher. The grief of losing her parents would never fully fade, but it had been joined by joy and love and hope. "I am thinking," Ryder said slowly, "that we should start planning to expand the herd next year, maybe add another 50 head, improve our breeding stock." Violet smiled. "I was thinking the same thing, and maybe build a bigger barn. This one is getting crowded. Look at us, making plans like real ranchers. We are real ranchers." "Yes," Ryder agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I suppose we are." The years continued to pass with the mix of challenge and triumph that characterized ranch life. When William was 2, Violet became pregnant again. This time she carried with more confidence, knowing what to expect. In February of 1886, she delivered twin girls whom they named Margaret Rose, after Ryder's lost sister, and Elizabeth Jane, after Violet's mother. Ryder was beside himself with joy at having daughters, and William, now a busy toddler, was confused but accepting of the tiny intruders. The ranch grew along with the family. The cooperative expanded to 18-member ranches and had contracts with 3 different railroads. Thomas, now 18, decided to attend a small college in San Antonio to study agricultural science, with plans to return and implement new ranching techniques. Rose, at 16, was courting the son of one of the cooperative members, a steady young man named David who looked at her the way Ryder looked at Violet. Samuel, at 14, had become the ranch's best rider and was talking about competing in rodeos. Lily, now 10, still declared she would be a rancher when she grew up, and no one doubted her. The original debt to the bank had been paid off completely by 1887. The day they made the final payment, Violet and Ryder rode into town together, William perched in front of Ryder on the saddle. Mr. Henderson, the banker, seemed genuinely pleased as he marked the ledger paid in full. "I admit, Miss Dalton, when you first came to me, I did not think you would succeed," he said. "I am very glad to have been proven wrong." "It is Mrs. Morrison now," Violet corrected gently. "And it was not just me. It was all of us working together." On the ride home, Ryder was uncharacteristically quiet. When Violet asked what he was thinking, he smiled. "I was thinking about that first day I rode up to your ranch. You were fighting with that fence, looking so determined and so tired. I thought I would help you for a few weeks and then move on. And instead, you gave me everything I had lost and more. You gave me a life, Violet. A real life, not just existing from day to day. You gave me the same thing. I was drowning and you offered me a hand up. You offered to help raise 4 children who were not even yours. You became the father they needed and the partner I needed. We saved each other. I like that. We saved each other." Ryder looked back at William, who had fallen asleep against his father's chest. "And look what we built together." "Look what we built," Violet echoed. By 1890, the Dalton Morrison Ranch was one of the most respected operations in West Texas. The cooperative model they had pioneered had been replicated across the region, fundamentally changing how small ranchers did business. Thomas had returned from college with new ideas that improved their yields and cattle health. Rose had married David and they were expecting their first child, planning to build a house on the western section of the property. Samuel had won several rodeo competitions and was considering starting a horse training business. Lily, now 14, spent every free moment working alongside Violet and Ryder, learning every aspect of ranch management. Violet and Ryder's children were growing too. William, now 6, was a serious boy who loved helping his father with anything to do with horses. The twins, Margaret and Elizabeth, were 4-year-old whirlwinds who kept everyone on their toes. One evening in September, Violet realized she was pregnant again. She was 31 now, and this would be their 4th child. When she told Ryder, his reaction was immediate joy, though tempered with concern for her health. "Are you happy about this?" he asked, echoing her question from years ago. "Yes, surprised but happy." "You?" "Always happy to add to our family, though I think we are going to need to add on to the house again." "I was thinking the same thing." In May of 1891, Violet gave birth to another son, whom they named James Ryder Morrison. The birth was easier than the twins had been, and James was a contented baby who rarely fussed. William was proud to have a brother, and the twins were fascinated by the new baby. As the decade progressed, the ranch continued to thrive. The cooperative had become a permanent fixture of the regional economy, weathering droughts and market fluctuations through collective action and resource sharing. Jake Sullivan, now in his 70s, had turned his operation over to his grandson, but still attended every cooperative meeting, offering wisdom and perspective. On a summer evening in 1895, the extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Rose and David had 3 children now, living on their section of the property. Thomas had married a schoolteacher from Alpine, and they lived in town but visited often. Samuel, still unmarried, lived in the old barn that had been converted into a comfortable apartment. Lily, at 19, was being courted by a young rancher from a neighboring property. The gathering was to celebrate the ranch's official incorporation as Morrison Family Ranch, with Violet and Ryder as full partners. It was also, though not officially acknowledged, a celebration of survival and success against long odds. As the sun set and the children played in the yard, Violet stood with Ryder watching it all. William, now 11, was teaching James to skip rocks in the creek. The twins were playing with Rose's children. Thomas's wife was helping Rose set out food while Samuel and David discussed horses. Lily and her young man stood slightly apart, talking quietly. "Quite a clan we have accumulated," Ryder observed. "We have. Sometimes I can barely remember what it was like before, when it was just me and the children struggling to survive each day. I remember, you were the most stubborn, determined woman I had ever met. You still are. I had to be, for them." Violet gestured to her siblings, now grown or nearly so. "You did it. You kept them together. You kept the family intact. That was what mattered most to you, and you succeeded. We succeeded. I could never have done it alone." Ryder pulled her close. "Well, you did not have to. That was the point. You were raising them alone until a cowboy said, 'I will help you raise them all.' And I meant it. I am still here, still helping, still part of this family we built together." Violet leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the familiar comfort of his presence. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing something worth staying for. Thank you for letting me stay, for trusting me with your family, with your heart, with your life." They stood watching their family, their ranch, their life spread out before them in the golden evening light. It had been 13 years since that August afternoon when Violet's world had collapsed. 13 years of hard work and determination and love. 13 years of building something lasting from the ruins of tragedy. "Are you happy?" Violet asked, a question they had asked each other many times over the years. "Completely. You, more than I ever thought possible. We did it, Ryder. We made it work. We did. And we will keep making it work for as long as we both shall live." Violet smiled, remembering their wedding vows spoken all those years ago in Alpine's small church. "For as long as we both shall live." It had been a promise and a hope and a prayer, and here they were, living it every day. The children called them to eat, and Violet and Ryder joined the family. The table was crowded and noisy, full of laughter and conversation, and the comfortable chaos of people who loved each other. As Violet looked around at all the faces, she felt a profound gratitude for the life she had been given, for the cowboy who had stopped to help and stayed forever, for the family that had grown beyond anything she could have imagined on that desperate day in 1882. After the meal, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Violet and Ryder walked up to the hill where her parents were buried. The wooden crosses had been replaced with proper headstones now, carved with their names and dates and the simple words "beloved parents." "I come up here less often now," Violet admitted. "Not because I have forgotten them, but because I think they would want me living in the present rather than dwelling in the past. I think you are right, and I think they see what you built, how you kept the family together, how you made sure their grandchildren grew up safe and loved and secure. I hope so. I hope they know I did my best. They know." Ryder put his arm around her shoulders. "And they know about me too, about how much I love you and the children, about how I consider it the greatest honor of my life to have been welcomed into your family." Violet turned to face him, this man who had changed everything. His face was weathered now from years of sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples, but his eyes were the same striking blue-gray they had been that first day, and they still looked at her with love and wonder. "I love you, Ryder Morrison. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being exactly who you are." "I love you too, Violet Morrison. Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for everything." They kissed, and it was sweet and familiar and still managed to make Violet's heart flutter after all these years. Then they walked back down the hill hand in hand, toward the house where their children slept safe and sound, toward the ranch they had built together, toward the future they would continue to shape side by side for all the years to come. The Morrison family ranch would continue to thrive for generations. William would eventually take over the operation, running it with the same principles of cooperation and integrity his parents had established. The twins would both marry and have children of their own, staying in the area and contributing to the family legacy. James, the youngest, would become a veterinarian, serving the ranching community his parents had helped build. Thomas became a respected agricultural scientist, implementing innovations across Texas. Rose and David's children grew up as confident ranchers. Samuel eventually married and started his horse training business, which became renowned throughout the Southwest. Lily married her young rancher and they built a successful operation of their own, staying close to the family. But all of that was still to come. For now, on this night in 1895, Violet and Ryder returned to their home, checked on their sleeping children, and retired to their own bed. They lay together in the darkness, Ryder's arm around Violet, her head on his chest, listening to each other breathe. "Tell me again how we met," Violet said, a game they played sometimes, remembering. "You were fighting with a fence post in the hot sun, too stubborn to admit you needed help. I was a drifter with nothing but a horse and a few dollars to my name, looking for something I could not define. I stopped to pay respects to your father and ended up finding my home. You asked if I needed help with the fence. You told me you could handle it, but then you helped anyway. How could I not? You were struggling so hard, trying to be strong for everyone. I saw something in you that day, strength and vulnerability all mixed together. I saw someone worth knowing, worth helping, worth loving. And I saw a kind stranger who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I did not have to do everything alone. You did not. You never did again. They lay in comfortable silence until Violet spoke once more. Do you ever think about that day? About what would have happened if you had just ridden on past? If you had not stopped? Sometimes, but not often, because it hurts to imagine. Imagining a life without you, without our children, without this family, it is like imagining never having lived at all. I think about it. I think about how close I came to losing everything, how close the children came to being separated, how much we had to lose. But you did not lose it. We did not lose it. We fought and worked and built something better than either of us could have managed alone. Together, Violet said softly. Together, Ryder agreed. And that was the truth that sustained them through all the years that followed. They were stronger together than apart, better as a unit than as individuals, complete in ways that neither had been before they found each other. Violet had been raising her orphaned siblings alone, carrying an impossible burden with determination but no real hope. Until a cowboy said, "I will help you raise them all," and meant it with his whole heart. It was not a fairy tale. There were still hard days and difficult decisions and moments of worry. But there was also love, deep and abiding and real. There was partnership and respect and the knowledge that whatever came, they would face it together. There was family, blood and chosen, surrounding them with support and connection. Most of all, there was the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had taken broken pieces and made something whole. They had taken tragedy and turned it into triumph. They had taken desperation and transformed it into hope. As Violet drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, safe in the house they had built, surrounded by the family they had raised and the life they had created, she felt at peace. The journey from that terrible August afternoon in 1882 to this moment in 1895 had been long and difficult and sometimes painful. But every step had been worth it. Every struggle had led to this, a life filled with love and purpose and meaning. And on the hill behind the house, if the dead could know anything of the living world, Violet's parents rested easy knowing their daughter had not just survived but flourished, had not just endured but thrived, had taken the legacy they left her and built something wonderful from it. Their grandchildren would grow up strong and capable and loved, carrying forward the values of hard work, integrity, and family that had sustained the Daltons for generations. The Morrison name would be added to that legacy now, woven into the fabric of the family story. Ryder Morrison, the wandering cowboy who stopped to help and stayed forever, who chose to be part of something bigger than himself, who loved deeply and worked tirelessly, and never once regretted the decision to offer his help to a desperate young woman fighting to save her family. This was their story, and it was complete. Not without challenges yet to face, but with the foundation solid and strong, ready to support whatever the future might bring. They had made it through the worst and come out the other side, not unscathed but intact, not unchanged but better for the changes. As the night deepened and the ranch settled into sleep, the Morrison family rested secure in the knowledge that they were home, they were together, and they were loved. And really, in the end, that was all that mattered. That was everything. The stars wheeled overhead in the vast Texas sky, indifferent and eternal. But down below, in a small ranch house surrounded by hard-won prosperity and hard-earned peace, two people who had found each other against the odds slept in each other's arms, their children safe nearby, their future stretching bright before them. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything they had fought for, and everything they had hoped for, and everything they needed. It was home and family and love, and it would sustain them for all the days of their lives, through whatever trials and triumphs lay ahead. This was the life they had chosen, the family they had built, the love they had nurtured from the smallest seed of possibility into something strong and lasting and true. And they would tend it carefully, gratefully, faithfully, for as long as they both should live. And they lived long, those two, growing old together as the 20th century dawned and the Wild West faded into memory and legend. They saw their children grow and their grandchildren born. They saw the ranch prosper and the cooperative become an institution. They saw Alpine grow from a small frontier town into a settled community. Through it all, they faced every change and challenge together, partners in the truest sense of the word. When Ryder finally passed in 1928 at the age of 72, Violet held his hand and told him once more how grateful she was that he had stopped that day, how much she loved him, how he had saved her and her family in every way that mattered. And Ryder, with his last breaths, told her it had been his honor and his joy, that she had saved him too, that he had lived a life beyond his wildest dreams, because she had trusted him and loved him and made him part of something beautiful. Violet lived 3 more years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy she and Ryder had built together. When she joined him in 1931, she was buried beside him on the hill behind the house, next to her parents, all of them together at last. The ranch continued, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story that began on that desperate day in August 1882, when a young woman stood alone against impossible odds, and a cowboy offered the simple words that changed everything: "I will help you raise them all." It was a promise kept, a life well lived, a love story that transcended the hardships of time and place to become something eternal. And though the people passed, and the world changed, the truth of what they built together remained. That love and partnership and family could overcome any obstacle, that helping each other made everyone stronger, and that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with a simple offer of assistance from a stranger who becomes so much more. This was their story, complete and whole and true. A testament to the power of love, the strength of family, and the transformative possibility of two people choosing to face life together rather than apart. It began with tragedy and ended with triumph, began with loneliness and ended with love, began with desperation and ended with hope fulfilled beyond measure. And that, in the end, was everything.